All right, welcome back to another deep dive. You know this works, right? You send us something you're curious about, we dig in and try to unearth some hidden gems.
Or at least try to make sense of it all.
Yeah, exactly. And today's topic, well, it comes from, let's see here, looks like a listener named, interesting name, Barbells and Biceps. They sent us some excerpts from a document called, get this, Doggcrapp Training.
Sketchy.
Yeah, right. Anyway, it was created by a guy who calls himself Dante, or sometimes Doggcrapp, so, gotta love the internet.
Gotta love it. So what's the mission for this deep dive? What exactly are we hoping to understand?
Well, Barbells and Biceps, or whoever sent this in, they were pretty clear. They want us to cut through all the hype and the bro science you always hear in the fitness world.
Right.
And really get to the core of what this Dante or Doggcrapp believes actually leads to, like, serious muscle growth. Not just the beach muscles.
I feel like this is going to be interesting.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
So let's dive in. Okay, so right off the bat, one of the biggest things that jumps out from this Doggcrapp training is the emphasis on strength gains.
Okay, yeah, I see that too. And it's not just about being strong, it's about getting stronger, right? Like the whole foundation of this system seems to be built on the idea that the more strength you gain, the more muscle you gain.
Exactly. He even says it straight up. Let me find the exact quote here. Here it is. He who makes the greatest strength gains in a controlled fashion as a bodybuilder makes the greatest muscle gains. It's all about progression.
Makes sense. I mean, if you think about it logically, when you lift weights, you're essentially forcing your muscles to adapt to a stress to handle a heavier load than they're used to. So if that load keeps increasing, the adaptation has to keep happening.
Right, right. And he gives this really, I know it's a pretty compelling example with the bench press. He says, if you go from benching, say, 150 pounds to 400 pounds, yeah, you're probably looking at adding like 2.5 inches of muscle to your chest just from that increase in strength. That's pretty significant.
Yeah, that is. So it's not just about chasing the pump then.
Well, he definitely seems to think the whole pump thing is kind of overrated. He used this funny analogy with calf raises, where you could do like 500 reps and get a huge pump in your calves.
Oh, I hate calf raises.
Me too. But you get the point, right? You can do all those reps and get that feeling. But if the weight isn't increasing over time, your calves are probably not going to grow much.
So it's not about feeling the burn or getting that pump. It's about consistently pushing yourself to lift heavier and heavier weights.
Yeah, that seems to be the core message here. And you know what? It kind of makes sense when you think about it. Like, our bodies are designed to adapt, right?
Right. We adapt to the demands we place on them.
And when it comes to building muscle, that adaptation means getting stronger to handle heavier loads.
Yeah. And he even argues that while there are limits to how much we can change the sets and reps and techniques we use, the potential to increase the weight we lift is pretty much unlimited. That's where the real growth comes from.
Makes you wonder why so many people get stuck doing the same weights, same routines year after year.
Yeah, that's a good point. Maybe they're missing out on some serious gains by not focusing on progressive overload. So I guess the next question is, what does heavy even mean in this context? Like, is there a specific weight we should all be aiming for?
Well, he actually addresses that directly. He makes it clear that heavy is relative. It's the heaviest weight you can handle for a given rep range, while still maintaining proper form and all that good stuff.
Right, that makes sense. So it's not about comparing yourself to anyone else. It's about pushing your own limits.
Exactly. So someone might think squatting 225 for 20 reps is heavy, while for another person it's 405. It's all individual. And that brings us to another really interesting point he makes about observing elite bodybuilders.
Oh, yeah, I saw that section. He basically says that most of the biggest pro bodybuilders, the ones who are truly massive, well, they also tend to be incredibly strong.
Exactly. Like
Yeah.
list guys like Kovacs, Prince, Coleman,
Yeah.
these legendary bodybuilders. They weren't just big. They were moving serious weight in the gym, which kind of makes you think, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if those guys with already amazing genetics were still prioritizing strength, it's probably something worth paying attention to for the rest of us, especially us mere mortals who aren't using,
Yeah, yeah. He even talks about how some pros who switch to lighter training later in their careers might not be seeing the same kind of growth they did when they were pushing heavier weights.
Like they're maybe trying to convince themselves that lighter is better.
Maybe. And then he brings up Ronnie Coleman, which, I mean, come on. How can you not? The guy was a monster.
Yeah, 800-pound deadlifts for reps, even when he was already huge.
And he was a power lifter before he even got into bodybuilding, so strength was always a foundation for him.
Okay, so if someone like Coleman, with his genetics, still saw value in training heavy.
Then the rest of us should probably take note, right? He even contrasts Flex Wheeler, who was known for training lighter, with Chris Cormier, who trained heavy.
You too.
Cormier outweighed Wheeler significantly on stage, even though they were similar heights and supposedly using similar, uh,
Supplements. Yeah, I get it. So training style matters even when genetics and other factors are similar.
it really makes you think, huh? And all this leads to his perspective on training for those of us who are natural, meaning not using performance-enhancing drugs.
And what does he say about that?
Well, he brings up this really interesting point. He says, look, if guys in gyms who are using steroids aren't even getting big with light weights, what makes natural lifters think they can?
Good question. It's like, if it doesn't work for them, what chance do we have?
And he throws out this statistic, something like only 1 in 300 people in the U.S. admit to using steroids. But, he says, look around. You don't see nearly that many massive guys walking around, right? So clearly, drugs alone aren't the answer.
So training still matters. A lot.
Absolutely. He even wants us to think back to our own training, to when we were making the most progress.
Okay, so for me, it was definitely when I first started lifting seriously. Those first couple of years, the gains were coming fast.
That's exactly what he's talking about. Because for most people, that's when strength gains are the most rapid, right?
Yeah. You're still kind of a newbie, so you're adapting quickly to the stress of lifting.
And he compares that to steroid use, where you also see quick gains in both strength and size early on. Of course, there are other factors involved too, like protein intake and all that. But the point is, rapid strength increases seem to be a key driver of muscle growth, whether it's natural or enhanced. And this kind of leads into his whole philosophy of what he calls power building.
Okay, so what exactly is power building? Is it like a combination of powerlifting and bodybuilding?
Yeah, kind of. He basically describes it as a training style where the focus is on making the fastest strength gains possible, using the most effective exercises for your individual body. He even uses this funny analogy with twins, imagining two identical twins.
Oh, I love twin analogies.
Me too.
Yeah.
So imagine these twins, right? Same genetics, same diet, same everything. But one twin trains specifically for strength gains, while the other twin does some other kind of training.
So like one is hitting the power lifts hard, the other is maybe doing more bodybuilding style workouts.
Yeah, exactly. And his argument is that the twin who's focused on strength is probably going to build way more muscle over a year than the other twin, even if everything else is identical. It's all about that progressive overload, that constant drive to get stronger.
I like it. It's a simple but powerful concept.
Right. And then he points to powerlifters who diet down for bodybuilding competitions.
Oh, yeah, I've seen that. Some of those guys look incredible when they lean out.
Exactly. They have all this muscle mass built from training for strength, and then when they drop the body fat, it's like, bam.
So focusing on strength can definitely lead to a great physique.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, to be clear, he's not saying you have to become a power lifter, but the principle is the same. Prioritize getting stronger on key lifts, and the muscle will follow.
Okay, that makes sense. But I'm still a little fuzzy on what he considers heavy. Like, does it always mean doing low reps?
No, not necessarily. Remember, he says heavy is relative to you. It's about finding the heaviest weight you can handle for a given rep range, whatever that rep range might be.
So for example?
He talks about doing heavy hack squats for 20 reps, using 6 plays per side. Now, that's heavy for him on that exercise.
Right. So it's about pushing your limits no matter the rep scheme.
Exactly. He stresses that once you can squat, say, 400 pounds for 20 deep reps, you're probably not going to be too worried about your leg size. It's like a whole different level of development. And this kind of goes back to the whole principle of progressive overload, which is something he talks about a lot.
Right, that idea of constantly challenging your muscles to adapt by increasing the weight, reps, or sets over time.
Exactly. And he emphasizes that regardless of what specific techniques you use, this progressive overload is essential for long-term muscle growth. He uses this analogy of being stranded on a deserted island with weights.
Oh, okay, I think I remember this one. It's like, if you're stuck with a limited set of weights, your progress is eventually going to stall no matter how creative you get with sets and WAPs.
Yeah, you're going to hit a ceiling.
Yeah.
But if you have access to progressively heavier weights...
The sky's the limit.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Your muscles have a reason to keep growing because they're constantly being challenged with heavier loads. It's that simple.
Yeah.
And he also tackles this common idea in the fitness world about constantly changing up your routine to keep your body guessing.
Oh, yeah, I've heard that before. Like, you should always be switching exercises to shock your muscles into growth.
Well, he has a pretty interesting take on that.
Let me guess, he's not a fan.
He's not buying it. He argues that the real shock to your system, the real trigger for growth, comes from consistently demanding more strength, not from just doing different exercises. It's not about keeping your body off balance. It's about forcing it to adapt to heavier and heavier weights.
Okay, I'm starting to see his point. It's not about being random, it's about having a purpose behind your training.
Exactly. And he uses another twin analogy here. Imagine one twin who just keeps increasing the weight on their squat, say, aiming to hit 20 reps every time.
Okay, I can picture it.
And then the other twin is constantly changing their leg exercises, trying all the latest fancy moves, but they never really increase the weight.
So one twin is focused on progressive overload, the other is just like exercise hopping.
Right. And guess who ends up with bigger legs? The twin who is consistently pushing for heavier squats.
Sure.
It's about that focused, progressive effort. And that leads into how he approaches exercise selection and progression.
Okay, so how does he decide what exercises to do?
Well, he basically says, stick with an exercise as long as you're making strength gains on it. If you're getting stronger, there's no need to change.
So don't fix what ain't broke.
Exactly. It's only when you hit a true plateau, when you can't seem to add more weight or reps, that you should consider switching to a different exercise.
So it's not about getting bored or needing variety. It's about strategic progression based on your strength gains.
Precisely. And he even points out that you can always come back to a previous exercise later on and potentially hit even higher levels of strength.
So it's not like abandoning an exercise forever. It's just cycling through them strategically.
Exactly. He shares an example with the reverse grip bench press, where he has a specific weight and rep target he has to hit to avoid switching to a different triceps exercise. It's all very deliberate.
I'm starting to see how this system is all about pushing yourself, about constantly striving for more.
And none of it works without tracking your progress.
Oh, yeah, the good old training log, right?
Yeah. He's a huge advocate for that. You have to write down the weights, the reps, everything, so you can keep pushing to beat your previous best.
It's like you're competing against yourself, trying to break your own records.
Exactly. And he says that the threat of having to change an exercise if you're not progressing adds a whole other level of intensity to your workouts. It's like, if I don't hit this number, I got to switch to something else.
That's a good motivator, for sure. So it's all about that constant drive to improve, to get a little bit stronger each time you train.
And that's what he believes ultimately leads to the most muscle growth possible for your individual potential. He even shares his own story, how he went from being like 137 pounds to over 300 pounds.
No way, 137. He must have been tiny.
Yeah, and he talks about how frustrating it was to hear people say it was all genetics after years of dedicated training. But he proved them wrong.
So it's not just about genetics, it's about putting in the work, about having that mindset of constantly pushing yourself.
And he emphasizes that it's not about spending hours and hours in the gym. It's about quality over quantity, about focusing on those heavy lifts and pushing them to the limit. He actually summarizes his training principles as heavy weights, low volume, consistent stretching, and a specific frequency for training each body part. Beyond that core of strength progression, he talks about the importance of other key aspects like keeping volume relatively low, focusing on specific stretching methods, and following a set training frequency for different muscle groups.
Okay, but hasn't he faced some pushback on his methods? Like, wouldn't people say he's advocating for overtraining or undertraining or something?
Oh, definitely. He talks about how his approach has been met with a lot of skepticism and arguments, but he firmly believes that high volume doesn't necessarily equal better results. He points to the successes of his own trainees, who've made significant gains following his system, and he's passionate about helping people, especially those who maybe don't think they have great genetics, realize their full potential through hard work and heavy lifting.
So he walks the walk, and he's got the results to back it up.
Exactly. And he shares some specific examples of weight gains from his trainees, people who started out average and made incredible progress following his guidance.
So it's not just theory, it's actually working for people in the real world.
Exactly. And he even mentions his current trainee, Roland, who he believes is on track for some pretty impressive gains.
Interesting. So it's a system that's constantly evolving too, right? He's still refining it and helping people achieve their goals.
Yeah, and he ends with this really, it's a call to action almost. He encourages listeners to try out his principles for themselves to see what happens.
So put it to the test. Don't just take his word for it.
Exactly. He says if you've been training for years and haven't seen the progress you want, maybe it's time to question your approach and try something different. Like, what have you got to lose?
Right, right. If what you're doing isn't working, why not give something else a shot?
So, to sum it all up, this Doggcrapp training, it really boils down to this. Prioritize progressive overload on key exercises. Track your progress religiously, and be willing to adapt when you hit a plateau.
And maybe, just maybe, that constant focus on getting stronger, on pushing your limits, could be the key to unlocking some serious muscle growth no matter what your genetics are.
It definitely gives you something to think about, huh? Like, think back to your own training journey. Have you really, truly been focused on increasing the weight you load over time? If not, maybe that's the missing piece. Who knows, right? It's all about experimenting, finding what works best for you. And hey, maybe Doggcrapp training is the answer. Thanks for diving deep with us again. We'll catch you on the next one.